The deed burned in Caleb Vane's pocket as he stood face to face with the girl who'd just offered herself like livestock. "Take me instead," she'd whispered, and something in her voice, not fear, not even desperation, but a cold calculation that reminded him of soldiers trading rations before battle, made his hand freeze on his rifle. He'd come to Montana to take land. Nobody'd warned him he'd have to look a dying man's daughter in the eye and decide what kind of bastard he really was. Before we go further, hit that subscribe button and stick with me till the end of this story. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. Now let's get into it. Caleb Vane learned how to stop feeling at Shiloh. Took him about 3 hours, right around the time the screaming stopped, sounding like people, and started sounding like wind through broken windows. 20 years later, riding through Montana with a federal deed and a hangover, he'd perfected the art. His horse crested the ridge at dawn. Smoke rose thin from a cabin chimney below the Dunn place. He'd evicted 11 families this summer. This'd be 12. He rode down slow counting problems, sagging barn fence held up by prayer and rust garden that had seen better years. The railroad was paying him $40 for this. Seemed high considering. The cabin door opened before he dismounted. She stood there with work-raw hands and eyes that had forgotten how to trust. Not young, maybe 26, 27, but carrying herself like someone who'd aged in dog years. Flour dusted her sleeves. Blood spotted her apron. "You're the Vane," she said it flat. "Caleb Vane. Here to see Jeremiah Dunn about. I know what you're here for." She didn't blink. "Question is whether you'll have the stones to look him in the face when you do it." That stopped him. Most folks begged or cried or got angry. She just stood there like she'd already calculated the odds and didn't like the math. "Is he available?" "He's dying." She turned back inside, left the door open. "But I guess that makes him available enough." Caleb followed her in. The cabin hit him wrong. Everything worn to threads but clean as a church. Quilts patched so many times the patches had patches. Books on a shelf, spines cracked from actual reading. And in the corner, pulled close to the stove, a bed with a man in it who looked like death was already filling out paperwork. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please?" She poured 2 cups from a pot that had been on the stove since yesterday by the smell of it, handed him one without asking about sugar or cream. Smart, she probably had neither. The old man's eyes opened, blue and faded, but still sharp enough to cut. "You're the land thief." His voice scraped like a shovel on frozen ground. "Saw you riding down. Figured you'd make it eventually." "They always do." Caleb set down his coffee. "Mr. Dunn, I'm authorized by the Northern Pacific Railroad to inform you that this property has been legally acquired through territorial—" "Son, I was pulling rocks out of this ground when you were still pissing yourself in whatever Kansas shithouse you crawled from." Jeremiah coughed wet and wrong. "Don't insult me with the speech. Just tell me how long we got." The girl Rosalyn, he guessed, pressed a rag to her father's mouth. Came away red. She didn't flinch. 30 days, Caleb said. "Standard eviction timeline. Railroads offering compensation based on 30 days. Jeremiah laughed, then coughed again. "Hell, that's generous. Doctor says I got maybe 90 if the winter's kind. So you're really just stealing from a corpse, aren't you?" "The law says." "The law." Jeremiah's eyes burned. "Let me tell you about law, boy. I came here in '68. This land was empty, not owned by the government, empty, but actually empty. No white man, no Indian, nobody. Just grass and wind and dirt that'd break your plow if you looked at it wrong. I broke 3 plows. Broke my back. Broke my wife's heart when our first baby died of fever, and we had to bury her out there, under that oak tree." He stopped for breath. "Now you ride up with a piece of paper signed by some politician who never set foot past St. Louis, and you tell me about laws just what rich men write when they want poor men's land." Caleb had heard variations of this speech 9 times this summer. He'd learned to let it run out like a fever. But then Rosalyn spoke. "How much?" Caleb looked at her. "Excuse me." "The compensation." "How much?" $140. She laughed. Single sharp sound, no humor in it. "That's it. 17 years of work. A wife buried a daughter who died at 2 months, fields cleared by hand, winters survived, and you're offering $140. She stepped closer. "You know what we could buy with that? Maybe 6 months in a boarding house in town? Maybe food through spring if we stretch it. Definitely a coffin. That what you think this is worth? Market value is determined by my market value." She said it like a curse. "You mean what you can steal it for and still sleep at night?" "I don't make the prices, Miss Dunn. I just enforce the contracts." "Right. You just follow orders." Her smile could have cut glass. "Where have I heard that before?" The shot landed. Caleb felt it in his chest. "Rosalyn," Jeremiah said quietly. "No, Pa." She kept her eyes on Caleb. "He wants to come here and do business. Then let's do business. You say this land is worth $140. I say it's worth more. But I also know the railroad doesn't give a damn what I say. So here's my offer. You want something worth taking? Take me." The room went silent except for Jeremiah's breathing. "Absolutely not," the old man said. Rosalyn ignored him. "I can work. Cook, clean, mend, tend livestock. I'm strong. I can read and figure numbers. I've got no husband, no kids, nothing tying me down. Indentured service is legal in the territory's 7 years' labor for the debt. You leave Pa the land until he dies. I work off the value. Everybody gets what they want." Caleb stared at her. "You can't be serious." "Do I look like I'm joking?" She didn't. She looked like a woman who'd already calculated the cost and decided she could pay it. "I don't buy people," Caleb said. "Then take me as payment." She didn't blink. "Unless your railroad's got principles I don't know about." "Rosalyn, I won't allow." Jeremiah tried to sit up, failed. "You don't have a say, Pa." Her voice cracked. "I'm all we got left to trade." Caleb stepped back. "This wasn't how evictions worked. You served papers, they cried or yelled, you rode away. Clean, simple. Nobody offered themselves like, 'I need to speak with my employers,'" he said. "Your employers don't care," Rosalyn shot back. "They just want the land cleared. I'm offering you a way to do it that doesn't involve dragging a dying man into the cold. Unless that's what you prefer. I prefer to follow the law." The law. She moved closer. Close enough he could see the exhaustion carved into her face. "Let me tell you what the law did for us, Mr. Vane. It let my mother die in childbirth because the nearest doctor was 40 miles away and wouldn't come without payment up front. It let my little sister starve when the drought killed the crops because relief funds went to ranchers who could afford to bribe. It watched my father break himself for 17 years, and now it's kicking him out to die in a ditch. So forgive me if I'm not real impressed with your law." Caleb had nothing to say to that. "I'll come back tomorrow," he finally managed. "Give you time to think about..." "About what?" She laughed again. "About options we don't have. You're coming back to serve papers. Just do it now and quit pretending there's a choice. There's always a choice. Is there..." She tilted her head. "Then make one. Right now. Look at my father dying in that bed. Look at me. And choose whether you're the kind of man who can live with what you're about to do." Caleb looked. Really looked. At Jeremiah wheezing in the corner. At Rosalyn standing straight, despite everything breaking inside her. At the cabin they'd built with nothing but will and work. "Tomorrow," he said, and walked out before she could call him a coward again. He made camp by the river, built a fire, pulled out the deed. Read it 3 times like maybe the words would change. They didn't. Sleep didn't come. Around midnight, he gave up trying. He showed up at dawn with biscuits from town and coffee that didn't taste like mud. Rosalyn answered the door in the same dress as yesterday, like maybe she hadn't slept either. "Thought you'd bring the papers," she said. "Brought breakfast instead." He held out the basket. "Figured we could talk." "About what you delaying doesn't change the math." "Maybe I want to understand the numbers better before I finish the job." She studied him like he was a puzzle missing pieces. Then took the basket. "Coffee's already on. Yours is better, but I won't waste it." They sat at the table. Jeremiah was sleeping or pretending to. Caleb ate a biscuit he didn't taste. "You meant it," he said. "Last night. The offer. Every word." "Why?" "Why?" She looked at him like he'd asked why water was wet. "Because he's my father. Because he gave me everything. Because he's dying and deserves to die in the home he built. Because sometimes the only thing you can do is trade yourself for time." Why is that hard to understand? It's not hard to understand. It's hard to accept. That's your problem, not mine. Caleb set down his coffee. The railroad has rules, timelines. My cousin Morgan oversees this region. He's not flexible. If I don't serve these papers today, he'll come himself. And he won't offer conversation over breakfast. So you're saying you can't help? I'm saying I don't know how. But you want to. She said it flat. That's why you're here instead of serving papers. You want to find a way to make this right so you can sleep at night. Maybe. Maybe. She smiled bitter. Well, let me make it easy for you, Mr. Vane. There's no way to make this right. There's just whether you're the one who pulls the trigger or whether you hand the gun to someone meaner. Either way, we're dead. Question is whether you can live with which version you are. Caleb opened his mouth to answer. Hoofbeats interrupted him. They both stood. Through the window, Caleb saw a rider coming fast. Expensive horse, expensive coat, expensive everything. His stomach dropped. Morgan Vane dismounted like he owned the ground. Probably figured he did. Caleb met him outside. What are you doing here? Following up on a contract that should have closed yesterday. Morgan's smile was all teeth. 12 properties, Caleb. You've done 11. This one's taking too long. Makes me wonder if you're losing your edge. I'm being thorough. You're stalling. Morgan pulled out a pocket watch, checked it with deliberate slowness. Old man dying in there? That's not relevant. It's completely relevant. Dead man can't contest an eviction. We serve papers, he dies, railroad takes clean possession. Simple. Morgan looked past Caleb to where Rosalyn stood in the doorway. Miss Dunn, condolences on your father's condition. You'll have 72 hours to vacate once these papers are served. Compensation will be available at the land office in town. He can't be moved, Rosalyn said. Moving him will kill him. Then I suggest you make him comfortable where he is. Morgan pulled out papers. Caleb, I'll handle this since you seem to have developed scruples. Inconvenient things, scruples. Put those away, Caleb said. Excuse me. I said put them away. This is my assignment. Morgan's pleasant mask cracked. Was your assignment? Past tense. You've had 36 hours to close a simple eviction and haven't. That tells me you're compromised. So I'm taking over. Unless you want to explain to the regional director why you're protecting squatters. Caleb felt the crossroads crystallizing. Felt 20 years of following orders pressing down like a physical weight. Felt his father's ghost watching from Shiloh. They're not squatters, he said quietly. They're people. And I'm not serving those papers. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. You're refusing a direct order. Morgan's voice dropped to something dangerous. You understand what that means? Termination. Blacklisting. You'll never work in the territories again. Hell, you'll be lucky to find work shoveling shit in a Kansas stable. All for what? For them. He jerked his chin toward Rosalyn. For some farmer's daughter and a dying old man who won't make it to Christmas anyway. Caleb thought about his father dying in the mud at Shiloh. Thought about 20 years of not feeling anything. thought about Rosalyn's voice saying, "Choose what kind of man you are." "Yes," he said, "for them." Morgan stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Then he laughed sharp and ugly. "You sentimental fool. You absolute goddamn fool. Fine. Refuse. But I'll serve these papers myself, and when I do, I'll make sure everyone knows you failed. You're finished, Caleb. Finished." "Then I'm finished." Morgan's face went dark. 72 hours, Miss Dunn. And Caleb, you're dead to this family. Dead to the railroad. Dead to any future you thought you had. When you're starving in some gutter, remember you chose this. He mounted his horse, wheeled it around, and rode off in a cloud of dust and fury. Rosalyn walked up beside Caleb. They stood there watching Morgan disappear over the ridge. "What did you just do?" she asked quietly. "I have no idea." "He'll come back. With men, with lawyers, with—" "I know." "Then why?" She turned to face him. "Why would you burn your whole life for people you don't even know?" Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he'd forgotten existed. Someone who still believed in things like justice and mercy, even when the world had beaten that belief bloody. "Because you asked me who I was," he said. "And I didn't like the answer." Her eyes filled. She blinked hard, wouldn't let them fall. "You know this doesn't change anything. He has the law, the money, the power. We're still losing." "Maybe." Caleb pulled the deed from his pocket, looked at it one last time, then tore it in half. "But if we're losing the right way." Rosalyn stared at the torn paper. "That was your proof of authority." "I know. Without it, you can't prove the railroad sent you." "I know that too. So you just made yourself as powerless as us." "Guess I did." Caleb let the pieces fall. "We've got 3 days before Morgan comes back with replacements. That's 3 days to figure out how to fight this. Might not be enough. Probably isn't. But it's what we've got." "We." She said it like she was testing the word. "Why would you fight with us? This isn't your land. Isn't your fight." "It is now." Caleb met her eyes. "I spent 20 years running from the man my father thought I'd be. Maybe it's time I stopped running." Behind them, from inside the cabin, Jeremiah's voice rasped. "Boy, you just made either the bravest choice of your life or the stupidest. Time will tell which. But either way—" He coughed hard. "You're welcome at my table." Caleb nodded, not trusting his voice. Rosalyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. 3 days. We fight for 3 days. After that, we'll see." Caleb shook her hand. Her grip was calloused and strong. They walked back to the cabin together. Behind them, the torn deed pieces scattered in the wind like old ghosts finally set free. Caleb Vane had come to Montana to take land. Instead, he'd found something he'd lost at Shiloh, a reason to fight for something other than orders. Whether that made him brave or foolish, he didn't know. But for the first time in 20 years, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was becoming the man his father had died believing he could be. And that was worth fighting for. 3 days felt like trying to hold water in your bare hands. Caleb spent the first morning walking the property line with Jeremiah's old survey map, looking for any legal loophole that might exist in 18 years of boundary disputes and territorial claims. Rosalyn worked the garden like her life depended on it because it did. Every potato pulled, every carrot stored meant one more week they could hold out if things went south. And Jeremiah just watched from his chair by the window, wrapped in quilts that smelled like camphor, and dying. "You're wasting your time with that map," the old man said around noon. "Ain't no loophole. Railroad bought the territorial grant straight from Washington. It's legal as Sunday prayer and twice as heartless." Caleb folded the map, frustrated. There has to be something. A filing error, a missed signature, something. "Why? Because you need to believe justice exists." Jeremiah coughed into his rag. Son, justice is what men call it when they get their way. Railroad got their way. That's all the justice there is. So we just give up? Didn't say that. Said quit looking for justice. Start looking for leverage. Caleb stopped. What kind of leverage? The kind that makes men nervous. The kind that costs them more than they're willing to pay. Jeremiah's eyes sharpened. You know what Morgan really wants. This land ain't worth spit to the railroad. They're running track 15 miles south. But your cousin, he wants it because I wouldn't sell to him 6 years back. Called him a carpetbagger to his face. Some men don't forget that. So this is personal for him. Personal as it gets, which means he's got pride invested. Pride makes men stupid, makes them overreach. Jeremiah leaned forward. You want to beat him? Don't fight his law. Fight his pride. Before Caleb could answer, Rosalyn burst through the door, face flushed from running. Riders coming, 3 of them. Not Morgan. Caleb moved to the window. 3 men on horseback wearing deputy badges that looked about as official as a $3 bill. Town enforcers, the kind Morgan hired when he needed muscle that could pretend to be legal. Stay inside, Caleb told Rosalyn. He checked his pistol, walked out onto the porch. The lead rider was a thick-necked man with a face like a closed fist. He reined up 10 feet away, hand resting casual on his gun. You Caleb Vane? I am. Tom Wardell, Deputy Under Sheriff Pike. Got orders to escort you off this property. Railroads filed trespass charges. Trespass I'm authorized by... Not anymore, you ain't. Morgan Vane filed termination papers yesterday. Far as the territory's concerned, you got no business here. Wardell smiled, showing teeth that had seen better days. Now you can come peaceful, or we can make it interesting. Your call. Caleb felt the trap closing. Morgan had moved fast, cut him off legally before he could establish any claim to defend the Dunns. Smart. Ruthless. Exactly what he'd have done himself a week ago. I'm not leaving, Caleb said. That's the interesting option. Good. Wardell dismounted, his 2 men following. Been a slow week. Tom? A new voice cut across the yard. That's far enough. A 4th rider emerged from the tree line, an older man with a real sheriff's badge and eyes that had seen enough trouble to recognize it coming. Sheriff Pike himself. Wardell stopped. Sheriff, didn't expect to see you out here. Clearly. Pike rode forward, taking in the scene with the careful look of a man who'd learned to read situations fast. Got a telegram from the territorial governor this morning. Seems there's some question about the railroad's land grant. Federal Surveyor's Office found irregularities. Until it's sorted, nobody's evicting anybody. Caleb's heart kicked. What kind of irregularities? The kind that need investigating. Pike's face gave nothing away. Could take weeks. Could take months. Point is, everyone stays put until we know who owns what. Wardell's face darkened. Morgan Vane's gonna wait like everyone else. Now get back to town before I decide those badges you're wearing need closer inspection. The 3 men left Wardell shooting Caleb a look that promised this wasn't finished. Pike waited until they were gone, then dismounted slowly. You got coffee? Always, Rosalyn called from the doorway. They sat at the kitchen table, Caleb, Pike, Rosalyn standing guard by her father. The sheriff drank his coffee black and didn't speak until he'd finished half the cup. I'm gonna be straight with you, Pike finally said. There's no telegram, no surveyor investigation. I made it up. Caleb felt his stomach drop. Why? Because Morgan Vane's been running roughshod over this territory for 3 years and I'm tired of it. He's got money and connections, but he ain't got decency. Uses the law like a weapon. Hires men like Wardell who enjoy hurting folks. That ain't justice, that's tyranny with paperwork. Pike set down his cup. I can't stop the eviction, not legally, but I can slow it down. Give you time to figure something out. How much time? Rosalyn asked. Week, maybe 2 before Morgan realizes I'm stalling. Then he'll go over my head, get real territorial marshals involved, and it's done. Pike looked at Jeremiah. That enough time for you to die in your own bed? Jeremiah laughed, which turned into coughing. Might be, assuming I cooperate with the schedule. What do we do with 2 weeks? Caleb asked. We can't fight the deed. It's legal. Legal ain't the same as right. And around here, right still counts for something if you can make enough noise. Pike stood. There's a territorial assembly meeting in Helena next month. Railroads asking for expanded land grants. If enough folks showed up to testify about Morgan's methods, might make the politicians nervous. Might not stop your eviction, but could stop the next 100. That doesn't help us, Rosalyn said flatly. No, it doesn't. But it helps the territory. Sometimes that's all you can do, hurt the bastards enough they think twice before doing it again. Pike headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. Morgan's gonna escalate. He doesn't like being embarrassed, and you've embarrassed him. Watch your backs. All of you. After Pike left, they sat in silence. Outside, afternoon was burning toward evening. 2 weeks. Maybe less. We need more than time, Rosalyn said. We need a plan. I'm working on it, Caleb replied. Work faster. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay on the floor by the stove listening to Jeremiah's labored breathing and Rosalyn's restless movements in the loft above. Around midnight, he heard her climb down the ladder. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him in the dark. They stayed like that for a while, 2 people sharing silence, because words were too expensive to waste. You regret it yet? She finally asked. Tearing up that deed. Ask me again when Morgan comes back. I'm asking now. Caleb thought about it. About his ruined career. About the blacklist that meant he'd never work in the territories again. About how he'd thrown away 20 years of careful neutrality for people he'd known less than a week. No, he said. I don't regret it. Liar. Maybe a little bit of a liar. He smiled in the darkness. But not about the important part. What's the important part? That I'd rather be broke and decent than paid and ashamed. Rosalyn was quiet for a moment. My mother used to say something like that. Said a man's character is what he does when nobody's watching and nothing's at stake. I never understood it until I was older. Until I realized most folks never get tested. They go their whole lives without having to choose between what's easy and what's right. She turned to look at him, her face barely visible in the ember glow from the stove. You got tested. You chose right. That matters. Doesn't matter if we lose. It matters anyway. They sat there until the cold drove them back to separate corners, separate blankets, separate thoughts about what the next 2 weeks might bring. The trouble came on day 5. Caleb was repairing fence line when he smelled it smoke wrong and chemical. He ran toward it and found the southern field burning. Not wildfire. Deliberate. Someone had poured kerosene in 3 lines and lit them. He grabbed buckets, started hauling water from the creek. Rosalyn appeared beside him. Then 2 neighbors he'd never met. Word traveled fast in farming country. They fought the fire for 3 hours, beat it back to scorched earth and ash. The field was destroyed. Half their winter stores with it. Rosalyn stood at the edge of the burn line, face-smudged black eyes dry and hard. Morgan? Has to be. Wardell and his boys probably. Can't prove it, but we know. And Pike can't do anything. Not without proof. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected this. Then we hit back. How? I don't know yet, but if we just take it, we're already dead. We have to show we can bite too. That night, Caleb rode into town. Found the boarding house where Wardell lived. Waited in the alley until the man came out drunk at 11, then stepped into his path. We need to talk, Caleb said. Wardell squinted at him, then grinned. Little late for talking, ain't it? Never too late. Caleb kept his voice level. Morgan sent you to burn that field. I know it. You know it. Question is whether you want to keep working for a man who uses you like a weapon and throws you away when you're done. Big words from a man who's outnumbered, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to offer you something better. Caleb pulled out a roll of bills, $40, half his remaining money. This is for information. Where's Morgan planning to hit next? What's his timeline? Who's he paying? Wardell looked at the money, then at Caleb. You're serious. Dead serious. I can't stop him. But I can make it expensive. I can make him bleed money and reputation until folks start asking questions. Unless you want to keep being the one who does his dirty work while he stays clean. For a moment, Caleb thought Wardell might actually consider it. Then the man laughed and spat at his feet. Keep your money. Morgan pays better. And when this is done, I'll make sure you remember who you tried to bribe. He shoved past Caleb and disappeared into the night. Caleb stood there with $40 and no information, feeling like a fool. When he got back to the cabin, Rosalyn was waiting on the porch. Any luck? None. Good. He stopped. Good. I didn't think it'd work, but I needed you gone for a few hours. She stood, and in the lamplight, he saw something fierce in her face. Come with me. She led him to the barn. Inside, tied to a post, was Morgan's horse. The expensive one. And propped against the wall was Morgan's rifle. And laid out on a blanket were papers, land deeds, contracts, letters. Caleb stared. How did you... Rode to his camp while you were in town. He wasn't there. His men weren't there. So I took what I could carry. She picked up one of the deeds. Turns out Morgan's been doing this all over the territory. 23 families evicted in 2 years. All the deeds have the same witness signature, someone named Russell Kemp. Mean anything to you? Kemp's a lawyer in Helena, works for the railroad. Worked for the railroad. He died 3 months ago. Train accident. Rosalyn smiled, and it wasn't nice. So either Morgan's got a contract with God, or these deeds are fraudulent. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. This is it. This is what we need. Maybe. If we can get it to the territorial governor before Morgan realizes it's missing. She started gathering the papers. There's a coach to Helena tomorrow at dawn. You take these, I stay here with Pa. Even if Morgan comes, he can't do anything until he finds his papers. He'll know you took them. Let him know. What's he gonna do, admit his land claims are based on a dead man's signature? Caleb looked at her, this woman who'd offered herself to save her father, who'd just committed theft and possibly forgery charges to buy them a chance. You know this could backfire. If the governor doesn't believe us, then we're no worse off than we already are. She pressed the papers into his hands. But if we do nothing, we lose for sure. At least this way we fight. He wanted to argue, wanted to find the safe path, the legal path, the path that didn't end with her in jail. But she was right, they were past safe. They'd been past safe since he tore up that deed. All right, he said. I'll take them. But you need to promise me something. What? If Morgan comes while I'm gone, if he brings real marshals, real papers, you don't fight. You take your father to town, you let Pike protect you, and you wait for me to get back. And if you don't get back, then you run. Take Jeremiah and go. There's always another territory, another chance. She looked at him for a long time. You really think I'd run after everything? I think you're smart enough to know when fighting stops being brave and starts being suicide. Maybe. She turned away. Or maybe I'm just stubborn enough to believe we can win. Caleb left before dawn with a saddlebag full of stolen papers and a chest full of doubt. The ride to Helena took 2 days hard through mountains that didn't care about human troubles and valleys that swallowed sound. He kept waiting for Morgan's men to appear, for Wardell's deputies to cut him off for something to go wrong. Nothing did, which made him more nervous. He reached Helena on the evening of the second day, found the territorial office closed. Spent the night in a cheap hotel with bedbugs and thin walls, listening to miners argue and prostitutes negotiate. Didn't sleep. Morning came slow and gray. Caleb was waiting outside the governor's office when the clerk arrived at 7. "I need to speak with Governor Potts. It's urgent." The clerk looked him over, dirty clothes, 2 days beard, wild eyes. "The governor doesn't see people without appointments. I have evidence of land fraud. Multiple families evicted based on forged documents. He'll want to see this." "I'm sure he would. Make an appointment for next month." "Next month, those families are homeless. I need to see him today." "That's not—" "Tell him it involves Northern Pacific Railroad and illegal land seizures. Tell him I have 23 deeds signed by a dead man. Then let him decide if he wants to wait a month." The clerk's face changed. "Wait here." 20 minutes later, Caleb was sitting across from Governor Benjamin Potts, spreading papers across a mahogany desk that probably cost more than the Dunn homestead. Potts was a careful man with careful eyes. He read each deed slowly, comparing signatures, checking dates. Didn't speak for 15 minutes. Finally looked up. "Where did you get these?" Caleb had prepared for this question. "Does it matter?" "It matters if they're stolen. I can't act on stolen evidence. Even if it proves fraud. Especially then. Defense lawyers would have them thrown out before trial started." Potts leaned back. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, Mr. Vane. But this isn't how we build cases. We need—" "You need what? More time, more evidence, more families destroyed while you wait for everything to be perfect." Caleb heard his voice rising, couldn't stop it. "I've got a dying man on a homestead he built with his hands. His daughter offered herself as payment to save him. And you're telling me we need better procedure. I'm telling you we need to do this right or it all falls apart. It's already falling apart." Caleb stood. "You think Morgan Vane's waiting for procedure? He's burning fields and hiring thugs and forging papers. He's winning because good men like you keep playing by rules he's already broken." Potts's face hardened. "Sit down, Mr. Vane." Caleb sat. "I understand your frustration. But vigilante justice isn't justice, it's just more violence. If I act on stolen evidence, I'm no better than the men I'm prosecuting." Potts gathered the papers. "However, I can open an investigation based on anonymous information. I can send territorial marshals to verify these claims. I can slow down future evictions while we examine the railroad's grants. It's not immediate, it's not satisfying, but it's legal. And legal is what separates us from them." "How long?" 6 weeks, maybe 8. "The Dunns don't have 8 weeks. Then I'm sorry. But I can't bend the law for one family no matter how sympathetic without breaking it for everyone." Potts softened slightly. "I know that's not what you want to hear. But it's the truth. Justice is slow. That's the price of making sure it's actually just." Caleb left the office feeling like he'd been gutted. 2 days hard riding, risking everything on stolen papers. And the best he got was 6 to 8 weeks. He was halfway back to his hotel when a thought stopped him cold. Pike had said Morgan would escalate, said to watch their backs. And here Caleb was 2 days away, leaving Rosalyn and Jeremiah alone with stolen evidence that proved Morgan was a fraud. He started running. Found a telegraph office, sent a message to the sheriff in Dunn's territory. "Check on Dunn homestead immediately. Possible danger. Vane." Then he bought the fastest horse he could afford and started riding. He pushed hard, stopping only when the horse was ready to drop. Made the 2-day ride in a day and a half, arriving after midnight on the 3rd night. Saw the smoke from a mile away. His heart stopped. He rode faster, fear turning his blood to ice. "Please, no. Please, not that. Please." The cabin came into view, still standing. The barn was burning. Caleb dismounted, running, saw Rosalyn silhouetted against the flames, spraying water that did nothing against the inferno. He grabbed another bucket, joined her. They fought it for an hour before accepting it was gone. The barn collapsed inward, sending sparks into the night like angry stars. They stood there covered in soot and ash, watching 17 years of work burn. "Pause inside," Rosalyn said, her voice raw. Breathing got bad. Smoke made it worse. Doc says maybe a week now, maybe less. Morgan came this morning with Wardell and 6 others. Said I stole from him. Said he'd burn everything unless I gave back the papers. I told him you took them to Helena. He didn't believe me. She turned to face him, and Caleb saw something broken in her eyes. They tore apart the cabin looking, threw Pa's bed around like it was garbage, made him stand while they searched. He collapsed, started bleeding from his mouth. That's when Pike showed up, ran them off. But Morgan promised he'd be back, said next time he'd burn the cabin with us in it. Caleb pulled her close. She didn't cry, she'd gone past crying into some dry place where feelings stopped. The papers, she asked. Governor won't act on them. Says they're stolen evidence. He's opening an investigation, but it'll take weeks. So we lost. We slowed him down, made him show his hand. That's something. Something? She laughed, bitter and empty. My father's dying faster because of what we did. The barn's gone. Morgan's angrier, and we bought ourselves what a few more days before he comes back and finishes it. She pushed away from Caleb. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm tired of being brave. I just want it to be over. Rosalyn, go check on Pa. I need to be alone. She walked toward the burned barn, stood at the edge of the ruins. Caleb watched her for a moment, then went inside. Jeremiah was in his bed wheezing. Blood spotted his pillow. Pike sat in the corner cleaning his rifle with methodical care. Bad? Caleb asked. Worse than bad, Pike said. Doc says the strain might have knocked a month off his time. Maybe more. Caleb sat down hard. Everything they'd done, the stolen papers, the ride to Helena, the desperate bargaining, and they'd just made it worse. I'm sorry, he said to Jeremiah. This is my fault. I should have— Shut up, Jeremiah rasped. You fought. That's more than most would do. Outcome don't change that. The outcome is you dying faster. I was dying anyway. Least this way I got to see someone stand up to the bastards. Jeremiah coughed, winced. You want to do something useful? Go make sure my daughter doesn't do something stupid. She's got that look. The one her mother had before she tried to fight off wolves with a broom. Caleb found Rosalyn where he'd left her, staring at ash and embers. We have to end this, she said. One way or another. What are you thinking? She turned to face him, and he saw something dangerous in her expression. I'm thinking Morgan wants these papers, and I'm thinking maybe we give them to him. We don't have them anymore. He doesn't know that. We tell him we'll trade papers for the deed to this land. Make it official. Make him commit. He'll never agree to that. Won't he? His whole operation depends on those deeds being legitimate. If word gets out they're signed by a dead man, every eviction he's done falls apart. He loses everything. So yeah, I think he'll trade. She smiled, cold and calculating. And once we have him committed, once we have witnesses, we spring the trap. What trap? The one where we've already sent copies of those deeds to every newspaper between here and Helena. The one where we've got statements from families he evicted. The one where we make him so toxic that the railroad cuts him loose to save their own reputation. Caleb stared at her. That's actually brilliant. And possibly insane. Probably both. Question is whether you're with me. He thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. Thought about safe paths and legal approaches and everything that had failed so far. Then he thought about Jeremiah coughing blood and Rosalyn standing alone against flames. I'm with you, he said. What do you need? Time to set it up. And someone Morgan will believe as a witness. She looked at Pike's horse tied to the post. Think your sheriff friends got any more of those flexible morals? Only one way to find out. They spent the rest of the night planning. By dawn, they had something that looked like a strategy, or at least like organized desperation. It'd have to be enough. Pike listened to their plan without interrupting his face, giving nothing away. When they finished, he sat there for a long minute rolling a cigarette he didn't light. You're asking me to lie under oath, he finally said. To falsify witness testimony. To help you set up what amounts to entrapment. We're asking you to bend the rules to catch a man who's been breaking them for years, Rosalyn countered. There's a difference. Not in a courtroom, there isn't. Pike struck a match, let it burn down to his fingers, dropped it. But then again, this ain't about courtrooms anymore, is it? This is about whether we let men like Morgan run roughshod because they're smart enough to keep their crimes legal. So you'll help? Caleb asked. Didn't say that. Said I understand why you're asking. Pike stood, walked to the window. Dawn was coming up gray and cold. You know what happens if this goes wrong. Morgan sues you for slander. Has you arrested for theft. Turns every legal gun he's got on you and buries you so deep you'll never see daylight. And me, I lose my badge, my reputation, everything I've built here. And if it goes right, Rosalyn pressed. If it goes right, we expose him. Railroad cuts him loose. Territorial governor opens a real investigation. Families get their land back. Justice actually happens for once. Pike turned back to them. But here's the thing about justice, it's expensive. Someone always pays. Question is whether you're ready to be the ones who pay if this falls apart. We're already paying, Caleb said. We've got nothing left to lose. Everyone's got something left to lose. Don't fool yourself otherwise. Pike picked up his hat. But I'm in. Not because I like your plan, I think it's half-baked and dangerous as hell. I'm in because Morgan Vane's been making me compromise my principles for 3 years, and I'm tired of it. So let's do this thing before I come to my senses. They spent the morning spreading word through town. Carefully, selectively. To people who had reasons to hate Morgan but weren't on his payroll. The blacksmith who'd lost his shop to railroad expansion. The widow whose husband had died fighting an eviction. The newspaper editor who'd been threatened for running stories about land fraud. By noon, they had 8 people willing to show up as witnesses. By evening, they had 12. Rosalyn wrote the message to Morgan herself, her handwriting careful and cold. Have your papers. Ready to trade for clear deed to Dunn property. Bring witnesses, make it legal, and this ends peaceful. Otherwise, papers go to every newspaper in the territory. Your choice. Meet at Dunn Homestead tomorrow noon. Caleb delivered it personally to Morgan's camp outside town, handed it to a guard, and rode away before anyone could stop him. That night, none of them slept. Jeremiah was worse, his breathing so shallow it barely stirred the blanket. Doc had come by at sunset, pulled Rosalyn aside, said things Caleb couldn't hear but understood from the way her shoulders dropped. Around midnight, Rosalyn climbed down from the loft and sat beside Caleb by the stove. They didn't speak for a while. Outside, wind rattled the windows and made the cabin creak like an old ship. He won't make it through another week, she said quietly. Doc says the strain from yesterday, the smoke, the stress, it damaged something inside. He's drowning in his own lungs now. I'm sorry. Stop saying that. Sorry doesn't change anything. She pulled her knees to her chest. You want to know the worst part? I used to pray he'd die quick. When the cough first started, when I saw what was coming, I prayed God would just take him fast. One night gone, no suffering. Seemed kinder. But now that it's actually happening, now that I can count his remaining days on one hand, all I want is more time. Just a little more. Isn't that stupid? That's not stupid. That's love. Love's a luxury we can't afford. She wiped her eyes roughly. Tomorrow when Morgan comes, if this works, if we actually pull it off, Pa won't be here to see it. He'll be gone. All this fighting, all this risk, and he won't even know if we won. He knows you fought for him. That matters. Does it? Or did I just make his last days harder? She turned to look at Caleb, her face half-shadowed. Tell me the truth. Did we do the right thing? Or did I just let my pride kill my father faster? Caleb wanted to say something comforting, something that'd make the doubt go away. But he'd learned that lies were expensive, and the truth was the only currency worth trading. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe we made it worse. Maybe if we'd just taken the money and moved to town, he'd have had a few more weeks of peace. But I know this: your father didn't want peace. He wanted dignity. He wanted to die knowing someone fought for what was his. You gave him that. Whether it was right or wrong, you gave him that. Rosalyn nodded slowly, like she was trying to convince herself. Tomorrow, whatever happens, you get yourself out if it goes bad. Don't stay for me. Don't try to be a hero. Just go. We both know I'm not doing that. Then you're a fool. Probably. But I'm the fool who tore up that deed, so we're past the point of smart decisions. She almost smiled. Almost. You know what scares me most? It's not losing. It's that we might win, and it won't matter. Pa will still be dead. The barn will still be ash. All the fighting in the world won't bring back what's already gone. No, but it might stop the next family from losing theirs. Sometimes that has to be enough. That's a cold kind of comfort. It's the only kind I've got. They sat there until dawn started bleeding gray through the windows. Somewhere in the cabin, Jeremiah's breathing hitched and settled. Outside, birds started their morning arguments. The world kept turning like it didn't care what happened at noon. Caleb checked his pistol twice. Rosalyn made coffee that neither of them drank. Pike arrived at 11. With 6 men, Caleb didn't recognize farmers and shopkeepers, people with weathered faces and careful eyes. This is everyone who'd come on short notice, Pike said. They're willing to witness whatever happens, testify if it comes to that. And if Morgan brings 20 men? Caleb asked. Then we've got a problem. But I'm betting he won't. He wants to keep this quiet, same as us. Public spectacle ain't his style. They waited. Time moved like cold honey. 11:30, 11:45. Noon came and went with no sign of Morgan. Maybe he's not coming, Rosalyn said. He's coming. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. He's just making us sweat first. At 12:15, riders appeared. 5 of them. Morgan in front, Wardell and 3 others, Caleb recognized as railroad men, the kind who wore suits but carried guns. They reined up 30 feet from the cabin. Morgan dismounted slow, making a show of being unconcerned. He wore a coat that probably cost more than the cabin and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Caleb, Miss Dunn. He tipped his hat to Rosalyn like they were meeting at church. Got your message. Have to say I'm impressed. Didn't think you had the stones for blackmail. It's not blackmail, Rosalyn said. It's a trade. Papers for deed. Simple business. Simple, Morgan laughed. Nothing about this is simple. You stole from me. Committed burglary theft, probably a dozen territorial violations. And now you want to negotiate like you've got leverage. We've got your papers. That's all the leverage we need. Papers I can replace. Witnesses I can buy. You really think threatening me with newspapers is going to work? I own half the editors in this territory. Morgan stepped closer. But I'm feeling generous. So here's my offer. You give me those papers right now. I'll let you walk away. No charges filed. No prosecution. You and your dying father can finish out his days in some boarding house in town, and we all pretend this never happened. That's not the offer we made, Caleb said. It's the only offer you're getting. Morgan's pleasant mask slipped. You're not in a position to negotiate. You've got nothing I can't get back and everything to lose. So quit playing outlaw and accept reality. Rosalyn pulled an envelope from her coat. These papers say different. They say you've been forging land deeds for 2 years. They say every eviction you've done is based on a dead man's signature. They say you're a fraud. Morgan's face went flat. Give me those. Trade first. Clear deed to this property, witnessed and legal, in exchange for your papers. That's the deal. There is no deal. Morgan's voice rose. You stole those. They're not evidence, they're stolen property. No court in the territory will accept them. Maybe not, but newspapers don't need court approval. Rosalyn held up the envelope. I've got copies in 3 different towns. 1 word from me, and every paper from here to Helena runs the story. Your name, your forgeries, Everything. You're bluffing. Am I? She smiled cold as January. Want to find out? The silence stretched tight. Morgan's men shifted, hands drifting toward guns. Pike's witnesses spread out, not threatening, but present. The math was close enough that nobody wanted to test it. Morgan pulled out a cigar, lit it with deliberate slowness. You know what your problem is. Miss Dunn, you think this is about right and wrong. It's not. It's about power. I've got the railroad behind me. Got politicians. Got money. You've got a dying father and a thief with a conscience. That's not a fight, that's a slaughter. Maybe. But slaughters make people nervous. They ask questions, start investigations, and suddenly all that power you've got starts looking shaky. Rosalyn took a step forward. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over a clear deed to this property. You're going to have it witnessed by Sheriff Pike here. And you're going to walk away knowing that if you come back, if you threaten us again, every paper you've signed for the past 2 years becomes public knowledge. And if I refuse, then we all go down together. You lose your reputation, we lose our land, nobody wins. Is that really what you want? Morgan studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're either very brave or very stupid. Little bit of both. What's it going to be? For a long moment, Caleb thought Morgan might actually walk away, might decide the risk wasn't worth it. Then Morgan smiled. Not pleasant, not friendly, just showing teeth like a wolf. All right, let's say I agree. Sign your deed, make it legal, walk away clean. You really think that ends this? That's the agreement. Agreements are just words on paper. You should know that by now. Morgan turned to Wardell. Go get the deed forms from my saddlebag. Looks like we're doing business. Wardell looked confused, but obeyed. While he was gone, Morgan took a long drag on his cigar and exhaled smoke toward the burned barn. Shame about your barn. Accidents happen, don't they? That wasn't an accident, Rosalyn said. Prove it. You'll find that's a common problem for people like you. Knowing something happened and proving it are very different things. Morgan's smile widened. But let's not dwell on the past. We're here to make a deal, right? Clean slate. Fresh start. All very civilized. Wardell returned with papers. Morgan spread them on a flat rock, started filling them out with a pen that probably cost more than Jeremiah's medicine. He wrote carefully, like he was enjoying the theater of it. This deed transfers ownership of these 80 acres from the Northern Pacific Railroad to who's the name Jeremiah Dunn. That's right. And when he dies, who inherits? I do, Rosalyn said. Morgan wrote it down. Witnessed by Sheriff Pike, effective immediately, all claims and liens released. That about cover it. That covers it. Good. Morgan signed with a flourish, handed the paper to Pike. Your turn, Sheriff. Make it official. Pike read the document carefully, his face unreadable. Then he signed and dated it. This deed is now legally binding. Miss Dunn, this property is yours. Rosalyn took the deed like it might explode, stared at it like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Now, Morgan said, my papers. She handed over the envelope. Morgan opened it, counted the deeds, checked each signature. His face stayed calm, but Caleb saw his jaw tighten. These are copies. Yes. I said I wanted the originals. And you got legal transfer of property. We never specified which papers you'd get back. Rosalyn's smile matched his. Guess we both learned something about reading the fine print. Morgan's pleasant mask shattered. You lying. Careful, Pike interrupted. We've got witnesses here, 12 of them. They all just saw you sign a legal deed transferring property. That's binding. You threaten these folks, now it's witness intimidation. That's a federal crime. This whole thing's a setup, Morgan snarled. You planned this. Planned what? A legal transaction witnessed by a lawful sheriff. Caleb stepped forward. Sounds like legitimate business to me. Morgan looked at his men calculating odds, looked at Pike's witnesses counting numbers, looked back at Caleb and Rosalyn with something like respect mixed with rage. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yeah, it is." Rosalyn folded the deed carefully. "You signed the papers, made it legal. You want a fight that take it to court. But every day you spend in court is another day people ask why you're so upset about losing one worthless homestead. Might make folks curious. Might make them look closer at your other deals." Morgan mounted his horse movements sharp with barely controlled fury. "You think you've won. You haven't won anything. You've just made yourselves targets. And targets have a way of finding bullets." "That a threat?" Pike asked. "It's a prediction." Morgan wheeled his horse around. "Enjoy your victory, Miss Dunn, however long it lasts." They rode away in a cloud of dust and threats. The witnesses slowly dispersed, heading back to town with a story they'd be telling for years. Pike stayed long enough to file the deed paperwork properly, then left with a warning to watch their backs. When everyone was gone, Caleb and Rosalyn stood in the yard holding a piece of paper that said they'd won. It didn't feel like winning. "We did it," Rosalyn said, her voice hollow. "We actually did it. We did. So why does it feel like we just made everything worse?" Before Caleb could answer, a sound came from inside the cabin. A crash, then silence. They both ran. Jeremiah was on the floor beside his bed, blood on his lips, eyes wide and frightened. Rosalyn dropped beside him, cradling his head. "Pa, what were you doing? You can't get up by yourself, you know that." "Wanted to see," he gasped. "Wanted to see if you did it." "We did. We got the deed. It's ours. You can rest now." Jeremiah's hand found hers squeezed weakly. "Proud of you, girl. Your mama would be proud too." "Don't talk like that. You're fine. We'll get you back to bed. Get the doctor." "No doctors." His breathing was ragged wet. "No more fighting. Just let me go, Rosie. Let me go knowing you won." "Pa, please. You did good. Both of you." He looked at Caleb. "Take care of her. She's stubborn as old leather, but she's got a good heart. Don't let her waste it being angry." "I won't," Caleb promised. Jeremiah smiled, closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. Rosalyn held him, rocking slightly, making sounds that weren't quite words. Caleb stood there useless, watching a man die who'd taught him more about courage in 2 weeks than he'd learned in 20 years. It took maybe 10 minutes. Felt like hours. Felt like seconds. Felt like everything ending and starting at the same time. When it was done, when Jeremiah's chest stopped moving and the room went quiet, Rosalyn didn't cry. She just held her father and whispered things Caleb couldn't hear. Private words between a daughter and her dead. Eventually she stood. Her face was dry but empty, like she'd gone somewhere inside herself where grief couldn't follow. "We should bury him under the oak tree," she said. "Next to Ma. He'd want that." "I'll start digging." "Not yet. Let me sit with him a while. Let me say goodbye properly." Caleb left her there and walked outside into afternoon sun that felt wrong for the day it was. They'd won. Gotten the deed. Saved the land. And Jeremiah had died anyway, just like they'd known he would. Victory tasted like ash. He started digging the grave around sunset when the light was going gold and soft. The ground was hard. 17 years of Montana had baked it solid, but he kept at it. Focused on the rhythm of the shovel, the burn in his muscles, anything but thinking about the man he'd barely known, but had come to respect more than most he'd known his whole life. Rosalyn came out when the hole was waist deep. She didn't say anything, just picked up a second shovel and started helping. They dug together as the sun set, and stars came out cold and distant. When it was deep enough, they went inside together. Jeremiah looked smaller in death. Like dying had subtracted something essential. They wrapped him in the quilt his wife had made, carried him out between them, and lowered him into the ground beside the oak tree that bloomed pink every spring. Rosalyn said words, some from the Bible, some her own, all of them quiet and fierce. Caleb added dirt, slowly hating every shovelful that covered the old man's face, his chest finally, his whole body. When it was done, when the grave was filled and mounded, Rosalyn placed a stone at the head. "We'll get a proper marker later," she said. "When we have money. Something that says his name and that he never quit." They stood there for a while, two people who'd fought for this ground and paid for it in different ways. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and distance. Somewhere coyotes started singing their twilight songs. "He died knowing we won," Rosalyn finally said. "That's something, right? That's everything." "Is it because it doesn't feel like everything? It feels like we traded his life for dirt." "We didn't trade anything. He was dying anyway. We just made sure he died free." "Free?" She said it like she was testing the word's weight. "He's dead, and I'm standing on land I never wanted in the first place. Some kind of freedom." "Rosalyn, don't." She turned to face him. "Don't tell me it's worth it. Don't tell me we did the right thing. I know we did. I just need to feel like shit about it for a while. Okay, can you let me have that?" "Yeah, I can let you have that." They walked back to the cabin together. Inside, it felt too empty without Jeremiah's breathing filling the silence. Rosalyn made coffee that neither of them drank, sat at the table staring at the deed like it was evidence of a crime. "Morgan's coming back," she said. "You know that, right? He's not going to let this go." "I know. And we don't have any more leverage. No more papers to threaten him with. No more tricks. Just us and 80 acres he wants. We've got the deed. That's legal protection." Legal protection didn't stop him from burning the barn. Won't stop whatever he does next. She looked up at Caleb. "Maybe we should sell. Take whatever we can get and leave. Start over somewhere he can't find us." "Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want. I just buried my father. I'm allowed to not know." Caleb sat down across from her. "When I was 17 after Shiloh, after watching my father die, I made a choice. I decided that caring about things hurt too much, that if I just followed orders and didn't let anything matter, I'd be safe. Spent 20 years being safe. And you know what I learned? Safe is just another word for empty. What's your point?" "My point is that we fought for this land because it mattered. To your father. To you. Maybe even to me. And if we run now, if we let Morgan scare us away, then we're right back to being empty. Just surviving instead of living. Maybe surviving's enough." "It's not. Not for you." He reached across the table, took her hand. "You offered yourself to save your father, stole papers from a dangerous man, stood up to threats and fire and loss. You don't know how to quit even when quitting makes sense. So don't start now. Not because of me. Not because of your father's memory. Because of who you are." Rosalyn's eyes filled. This time she let the tears fall. "I'm so tired, Caleb. I'm so tired of fighting." "I know. And I'm scared. Morgan's going to come back with something worse than fire, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to face it." "You don't have to face it alone." She looked at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them that didn't need words. An understanding built from shared loss and shared risk. A recognition that they'd become something more than allies. Maybe not love, not yet, but the foundation it could grow from. "You should go," she said. "While you still can. Before Morgan makes you pay for helping me." "I'm not going anywhere." "Why?" "You don't owe me anything. We barely know each other." "Maybe that's exactly why. Because I don't owe you. Because this isn't obligation or duty or following orders. It's choice. And I'm choosing to stay." Rosalyn nodded slowly, squeezed his hand. "Then I guess we're both fools." "Probably. But we're alive fools. That counts for something." They sat there holding hands across a table in a cabin that felt too big and too small. At the same time, two people who'd fought for something and lost everything except the fight itself. Outside, the wind picked up. Clouds moved across the moon. The land waited patient and indifferent for whatever came next. And in the distance, too far to hear, but close enough to feel, Morgan Vane made plans that had nothing to do with mercy and everything to do with revenge. The trouble came 3 days after they buried Jeremiah, right when Caleb had started to think maybe Morgan had actually backed down. He was wrong. He woke to Rosalyn shaking him hard, her face pale in the pre-dawn dark. Someone's poisoning the well. Caleb was up and moving before his brain fully caught up. Outside, he could smell it, something chemical and wrong mixing with the water. He ran to the well, pulled up the bucket, saw the oily sheen on the surface. Salt, he said, tasting it. Maybe lye. Enough to make it undrinkable for weeks. The creek's too far to haul water every day, without the well. Without the well, we can't stay here. Caleb looked toward the road, seeing nothing but knowing someone was watching. This is Morgan. Has to be. Then let's go tell Pike. Get him arrested. For what? We can't prove who did it. Could have been anyone. Rosalyn's hands clenched into fists. So he just gets to destroy everything piece by piece until we give up. That's exactly what he's counting on. Wants us to leave on our own, so he doesn't have to break the legal deed. Caleb stared at the ruined well. We need water. I'll ride to town, see about hauling barrels. You stay here, keep watch. I'm not staying here alone. Rosalyn. No. Last time you left, Morgan burned the barn. I'm not sitting around waiting for what he destroys next. She headed for the cabin. We go together, or we don't go at all. They rode into town an hour later, the morning cold enough to see their breath. The streets were quiet, too quiet. People who usually nodded hello suddenly found reasons to look away. The general store owner who'd sold them supplies for years claimed he was out of water barrels. Out of barrels? Caleb pressed. You had a dozen last week. Sold them all yesterday. Supply shortage. Try back next month. We need water now. Then I guess you should have thought of that before you made enemies. The store owner's face was apologetic but firm. I got a business to run. Can't afford to take sides. They tried 3 more shops, got 3 more versions of the same answer. Word had spread fast, help the Dunns, and make an enemy of Morgan Vane. Most folks figured that was bad math. They were leaving the 4th shop when Wardell stepped out of the saloon, flanked by 2 men Caleb didn't recognize. Both wore guns, like they knew how to use them. Heard you folks had some trouble with your well, Wardell said, his smile sharp. Shame about that. Wells are tricky things. All kinds of accidents can happen. That wasn't an accident, Rosalyn said. Prove it. Wardell stepped closer. See, that's your problem. You keep accusing people of things you can't prove. Makes you look paranoid. Makes folks wonder if maybe you're the problem. Caleb put himself between Wardell and Rosalyn. We're not looking for trouble. Good. Then maybe you should consider Mr. Vane's generous offer to buy your property. Fair price legal transfer, everybody walks away happy. We're not selling. That's unfortunate, because without water that land's worth about as much as dried cow shit. And I'm guessing you don't have the money to drill a new well or haul water for the next 6 months. Wardell's smile widened. So really selling's your only smart option, unless you enjoy dying of thirst on principle. We'll manage, Rosalyn said. Will you see, I'm not so sure. Word around town is you're broke. No family, no friends. Just 2 stubborn fools sitting on land they can't work. He looked at Caleb. And you threw away a decent career for what? For her. That's either true love or true stupidity, and I'm betting on stupidity. Caleb felt his temper rising, forced it down. Fighting Wardell in the street would just give Morgan an excuse to have them arrested. We're done here. Yeah, you are. Question is whether you're smart enough to know it. They rode back in silence, the weight of their situation pressing down like a physical thing. No water, no supplies, no support from town, and winter coming in a few months. When they got back to the cabin, they found the garden torn up, every plant pulled, every seedbed destroyed. Hours of work ruined in what must have taken minutes. Rosalyn stood there looking at the destruction, her face empty. He's not going to stop, not until we're dead or gone. I know. So what do we do? Caleb wanted to have an answer, wanted to be the man who could fix this with clever plans and determination. But standing there looking at poisoned wells and destroyed gardens, and a woman who'd already lost everything he had. Nothing. I don't know, he admitted. I'm sorry, but I don't know. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. Then maybe it's time to accept that we lost. Take whatever money we can get and leave before he kills us. Is that what you want? What I want doesn't matter. What matters is surviving. She turned to face him. My father's dead, Caleb. The land he built is cursed with Morgan's hatred. Staying here isn't brave, it's suicide. And I'm tired of pretending there's a difference. Before Caleb could respond, hoofbeats sounded from the road. They both tensed, expecting Wardell, or worse. Instead, they saw Pike riding hard alone, his face grim. We've got problems, Pike said, dismounting. Big ones. Morgan filed a lawsuit this morning. Says you stole documents, destroyed his property, and coerced him into signing a fraudulent deed. He's got 3 lawyers and half the territorial government backing him. That's garbage, Caleb said. The deed was legal. You witnessed it. I witnessed a transaction. Doesn't mean I can testify to what happened before. Morgan's lawyers are arguing the whole thing was entrapment, that you threatened him into signing under duress. Pike pulled out a folded paper. This is a temporary injunction. Says you can't sell the property, can't make improvements, can't do anything until the lawsuit's resolved. Could take months, maybe years. So we're just supposed to sit here while he destroys us piece by piece. Rosalyn's voice shook. That's justice. That's law. There's a difference. Pike looked genuinely sorry. I'll testify on your behalf when it goes to trial. But Morgan's got resources. He can drag this out, bleed you dry on legal fees, make it so expensive to fight that giving up looks reasonable. How much are we talking? Caleb asked. Lawyer fees. Couple $100 minimum. Maybe more if it goes to appeal. You got that kind of money. Caleb had maybe $40 left. Rosalyn probably had less. They both knew the answer. So, we've already lost, Rosalyn said flatly. Not lost, just losing. Pike hesitated. There might be one option. Territorial governor's doing a listening tour next week, meeting with farmers about land disputes. If you could get to Helena, testify in person might put pressure on Morgan to settle. Wouldn't win you the lawsuit, but might make him back off the harassment. And if we leave to go to Helena, what's to stop Morgan from burning the cabin while we're gone? Caleb asked. Nothing, which is why one of you goes, one stays. Pike looked between them. Not perfect, but it's something. After Pike left, they sat at the table trying to make impossible math work out. They had no money for lawyers, no way to fight a lawsuit, no water and no garden, winter coming in 3 months, and Morgan circling like a wolf that knew the deer was wounded. I'll go to Helena, Caleb said. You stay here, protect the property. Protect it with what I don't have enough bullets to hold off a determined raid, and you know it. Then I stay, and you go. I can't testify. I'm too angry. I'll say something stupid and make it worse. Rosalyn rubbed her face. We're trapped. Every option leads to losing. Then maybe we stop thinking about winning and start thinking about survival. Survival how? We can't drink salt water. Can't eat dirt. Can't pay lawyers with pride. Caleb stood, walked to the window. Outside, the land stretched away toward mountains that didn't care about human troubles. Jeremiah had broken his back for this place, had died for it, and now they were talking about abandoning it because Morgan Vane had deeper pockets and fewer morals. "What if we go public?" Caleb said. "Really public, not just newspapers. What if we find every family Morgan's evicted, bring them all to Helena, make it so big the governor can't ignore it? That's dozens of families scattered across the territory. We'd need weeks to find them, money to coordinate, and they'd need a reason to risk everything by testifying against a man who can destroy them." Maybe that's exactly the reason. Maybe they're tired of being destroyed one at a time. Maybe if we stand together. Together. Rosalyn laughed bitter. "You saw what happened in town. Nobody wants to stand with us. They're all too scared, and I don't blame them. So we just give up." "I didn't say that. I just said I don't know how to fight someone who's got the law and the money and the meanness to keep coming forever." She looked at him with eyes that had aged years in weeks. "I'm not afraid of dying, Caleb. I'm afraid of dying for nothing. And that's what this feels like, a fight we can't win no matter how brave we are." That night, Caleb lay awake listening to Rosalyn cry in the loft. Quiet crying, the kind where you press your face into blankets so nobody hears. He wanted to go up there, wanted to say something comforting, but he had nothing true that wasn't also hopeless. Around midnight, he heard her climb down the ladder. She sat beside him without speaking, and they shared silence like they'd shared everything else, hard and honest and insufficient. "I keep thinking about something Pa said," she finally whispered. "Right before you showed up that first day. He told me that some fights aren't about winning. They're about proving you existed, about leaving a mark that says you were here and you mattered and you didn't go quietly. That's cold comfort when you're losing. It's all the comfort there is." She turned to look at him. "If we're going down, and I think we are, then let's go down making noise. Let's make Morgan work so hard to beat us that everybody sees what he really is. Maybe we don't win, but maybe the next family does." "That's what Pike said." "Then maybe Pike's right." She stood, pulled him up with her. "Come on, we've got work to do." "What work?" "The kind that burns bridges and forces choices." Her smile was hard. "You wanted to go public. Let's go public." They spent the next 3 days writing letters, dozens of them to every newspaper editor between Montana and California. Detailed accounts of Morgan's methods, names of families evicted, dates and locations, everything they knew or could prove or could reasonably suspect. They sent copies to the territorial governor, to railroad executives, to anyone with power who might care about justice, or at least about appearances. Most letters would probably get ignored. Some might get Morgan's lawyers working overtime, but a few, maybe just a few, would land in the hands of someone who gave a damn. On the 4th day, Wardell showed up with 2 wagons and a dozen men. "Foreclosure," he announced, waving papers. "Morgan Vane's calling in debts owed by Jeremiah Dunn. Total comes to $300. You got $300. "My father didn't owe Morgan anything," Rosalyn said. "Sure he did. Borrowed it 6 years back for seed and equipment. Never paid it back. Got the promissory note right here, signed and witnessed." "That's a forgery." "Prove it. And while you're trying, we're taking possession of all property not covered by the land deed. Livestock, equipment, household goods, everything's fair game." Wardell smiled. "You got 1 hour to separate what's yours from what's owed. After that, we start loading wagons." Caleb looked at the note. The signature looked like Jeremiah's handwriting. Could have been real. Could have been faked. No way to know, and no time to fight it. "Take the equipment," Rosalyn said, her voice dead. "Take everything but the clothes on our backs if you want. Just get off my land." "Gladly. Soon as we're done." Wardell gestured to his men. "Load it up, boys. Everything that ain't nailed down." They took the plow, the spare tools, the last 2 chickens, quilts that had belonged to Rosalyn's mother, books that Jeremiah had treasured, everything that made the cabin feel like a home instead of just 4 walls and a roof. Caleb stood beside Rosalyn, watching them work, feeling helpless and furious in equal measure. We could fight them. With what? They've got 12 men in the law. We'd just get killed for nothing. So we let them take everything. We let them take things. Things can be replaced. She gripped his arm hard enough to hurt. We're still here. That's what matters. We're still standing. When the wagons were loaded and Wardell's men were riding away, they stood in the cabin that felt huge and empty. No furniture except the bed frame. No cookware. No blankets. Just bare floors and bare walls and two people trying to figure out how to survive without anything except stubbornness. We've got maybe a week before we starve. Rosalyn said, her voice flat. No food. No way to cook even if we had food. No water except what we can haul from the creek. And winter's coming. I know. So what do we do? Before Caleb could answer, someone knocked on the door. They both tensed, expecting more trouble. Instead, they found Sarah Chen, the widow who'd lost her husband fighting an eviction 3 years back. She carried a basket covered with a cloth. Heard what happened, Sarah said, pushing the basket into Rosalyn's hands. Brought food. And some cookware. And blankets. It's not much, but... Why? Rosalyn stared at her. Why would you help us? You saw what happened to the others who tried. Because I'm tired of being scared. Because Morgan Vane took my husband and I let him get away with it because I was alone. But you're not alone. None of us are if we stop acting like we are. Sarah turned and gestured toward the road. Coming up the path were more people. The blacksmith carrying tools. The newspaper editor with blankets. Farmers with seed and food. A dozen people, maybe more, all carrying things that said, "We see you, we're with you, you're not alone." Rosalyn's eyes filled. You'll all pay for this. Morgan will make you pay. Let him try, the blacksmith said. Been paying his price for years anyway. Least this way, we're paying for something that matters. They spent the afternoon restocking the cabin with donated goods. Not enough to be comfortable, but enough to survive. And more than that, enough to prove that Morgan hadn't isolated them completely. That somewhere beneath the fear, people still believed in standing up. That night, Caleb and Rosalyn sat on the porch, watching stars come out cold and distant. Inside the cabin felt less empty. Not because of what was in it, but because of what it represented. We're not going to win, Rosalyn said quietly. You know that, right? Morgan's got too much power. He'll find another way to hurt us. And another. Until we break, or leave or die. Maybe. Definitely. But I'm glad we fought anyway. Glad we made him work for it. Glad people saw us stand. She took his hand. Whatever happens next, even if it's bad, I want you to know I don't regret any of this. Not the fighting. Not the losing. Not you. Caleb squeezed her hand, feeling something in his chest that he'd thought died at Shiloh. I don't regret it either. They sat there holding hands while the night got colder and the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles. Somewhere in the dark, Morgan Vane was planning his next move. Somewhere the law was grinding slow toward conclusions that might save them or might destroy them. But for now, for this moment, they had each other and 80 acres, and a community that had chosen to stand with them despite the cost. It wasn't victory, but it was something more valuable. It was proof that they'd mattered, that they'd fought not because they could win, but because fighting was the only way to stay human. And sometimes in a hard world, that had to be enough. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Pike rode up at dawn, his horse lathered from hard riding. You need to hear this. Morgan's dead. The words didn't make sense at first. Caleb and Rosalyn just stared. What? Rosalyn finally managed. Found him in his tent last night. Heart gave out, Doc says. Probably the stress. Pike dismounted, looking exhausted. Railroad's already withdrawing their lawsuits. Without Morgan pushing it, they don't care enough to fight. And the territorial governor's office is opening investigations into all his land deals based on those letters you sent. Every eviction, every deed, everything's getting reviewed. So we won. Rosalyn's voice was strange, like she couldn't quite believe the words. Looks like it. Land's yours free and clear. Railroads offering settlements to families Morgan evicted. It's not perfect, won't bring back what's lost, but it's something. Pike allowed himself a small smile. You did it. You crazy fools actually did it. After Pike left, Caleb and Rosalyn stood in the yard trying to process what they'd just heard. The enemy who'd consumed their lives for weeks was just gone. Died of a bad heart and poor timing, and maybe the weight of his own cruelty. I don't know how to feel, Rosalyn said. I wanted him stopped, but I didn't want him dead. That makes me a terrible person, doesn't it? Makes you human. Human. She looked around at the land that had cost them so much. Pa died for this. We almost died for this. And now it's just over. Feels anticlimactic, doesn't it? Feels empty. She sat down hard on the porch steps. What do we do now? Caleb sat beside her. We rebuild. Fix what's broken. Plant what was destroyed. Live. Just like that. Just like that. She leaned against him and he put his arm around her shoulders. They sat there as morning sun warmed the land that was finally legally completely theirs. One not through violence or luck, but through sheer stubborn refusal to quit, even when quitting made sense. You staying? Rosalyn asked quietly. If you want me to. I want you to. Then I'm staying. They sat there together, two people who'd fought for something bigger than themselves and somehow survived. The land stretched away toward mountains that had outlasted them both. The cabin stood behind them empty still, but theirs. And somewhere beneath the oak tree, Jeremiah Dunn rested, knowing his daughter had won the fight he'd started. It wasn't the ending Caleb had expected when he rode up 3 weeks ago, with a deed and a dead heart. But sitting there with Rosalyn's head on his shoulder and the sun warming his face, he figured it was the ending they'd earned. And that was enough. The quiet was harder to get used to than the fighting had been. 3 days after Morgan's death, Caleb woke to silence so complete it felt wrong. No threats coming. No fires to put out. No urgent problems demanding immediate solutions. Just morning sun through the window and Rosalyn making coffee like this was any ordinary day. Except nothing about this was ordinary. Can't sleep either, she asked when he came downstairs. Keep waiting for the next disaster. Feels like it should be coming. I know what you mean. Like we're in the eye of a storm and any minute it'll start up again. She handed him coffee, their fingers brushing in a way that sent warmth through his chest. Pike sent word this morning. Railroads releasing settlements next week. $140 plus another $60 for damages. $200 total. That's good money. It's blood money. Pa's blood. Our blood. Feels dirty taking it. Feels necessary. You need a new well. Seeds for spring. Supplies to get through winter. Caleb sipped his coffee bitter and strong. Money doesn't care where it comes from. Only matters what you do with it. Rosalyn nodded, but didn't look convinced. She moved to the window staring out at land that looked the same as yesterday, but felt completely different. What are we doing, Caleb? What do you mean? I mean, what are we? You're staying, you said. But staying as, what, a hired hand? A partner? Something else? She turned to face him. I need to know where we stand because I can't keep pretending this is just about the land anymore. Caleb set down his coffee, his heart suddenly loud in his ears. They'd been dancing around this for days, the unspoken thing growing between them every time their hands touched, every time they sat together in the dark sharing silence. I don't know what we are, he admitted. I know I came here to take your land and ended up wanting to protect it. Know I expected to hate you and ended up respecting you more than anyone I've met. Know that when I think about leaving, my chest gets tight and I can't breathe right. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. I'm not good at this, Rosalyn. I spent 20 years not feeling anything, and now I'm feeling everything, and I don't know how to sort it out." She crossed the room, stood close enough that he could see the exhaustion still carved into her face, the grief she carried like a second skin. "I'm not asking you to sort it out. I'm asking if you want to stay because of the land or because of me." "Both." "Neither. I don't know how to separate them anymore." "Try." Caleb looked at her, this woman who'd bargained with her own freedom, who'd stolen papers and faced down armed men and buried her father while refusing to break. "When I look at you, I see someone who still believes in things worth fighting for. Someone who makes me want to be better than I've been. Someone who—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Someone who— what?" "Someone I think I could love. If you'd let me. If I knew how." Rosalyn's eyes filled. "You already do know how. You just spent 3 weeks showing me." "That was just doing what's right." "No. Doing what's right is the bare minimum. You did more than that. You burned your whole life down to keep me safe. That's not duty. That's—" Her voice broke. "That's everything." Caleb pulled her close, and she came willingly, pressing her face against his chest, like she was trying to hide from the world. They stood there, holding each other while morning light filled the cabin with gold that felt like promise. "I'm broken," she whispered. "I'm grieving and angry and scared, and I don't know how to be anything else right now." "That's okay. I'm pretty broken too. Maybe we can be broken together." She laughed against his shirt, wet and shaky. "That's the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. I warned you I'm not good at this." "Good thing I don't need good, just need honest." She pulled back enough to look at him. "So here's honest. I want you to stay. Not as a hired hand, not as a partner, as mine. If you're willing. If you can handle damaged goods with a temper and trust issues." "I think I can manage that." "Yeah. Yeah." He kissed her forehead, gentle and careful. "But I'm not much of a prize either. Got no money, no prospects, nothing but $40 and a bad reputation with the railroad." "Good thing I'm not interested in prizes. Just interested in you." They spent the rest of the morning working side by side, clearing debris from the burned barn, planning where to plant come spring. The work was familiar now, the rhythm of shared labor, the comfortable silence broken by occasional conversation. But underneath it all was something new, something fragile and precious that neither of them wanted to name yet for fear of breaking it. Around noon, riders appeared on the horizon. Caleb tensed automatically, then forced himself to relax. They had no enemies left, no reason to fear visitors. The riders turned out to be 3 families they'd sent letters to people Morgan had evicted years ago, who were just now hearing about the settlements. They wanted to know if it was true, if they could really get their land back. Rosalyn spent an hour explaining what she knew, giving them Pike's information, sharing what little she'd learned from the territorial office. Watching her with those families, patient and kind. Despite her own grief, Caleb felt something settle in his chest. This was who she was beneath the anger and fear. Someone who cared about justice, not just for herself, but for everyone. After the families left, Rosalyn sat on the porch, looking drained. There's going to be more of them. Words spreading. Everyone Morgan hurt is going to come looking for answers. You don't have to carry that burden. I know. But I want to help if I can. Someone should. She looked at him sideways. You think that's stupid? Worrying about other people's problems when we've got our own? I think it's who you are, and I think that's part of why I— He stopped himself, not quite ready to finish that sentence. Part of why you what? Part of why I'm staying. She smiled, small but real. Coward. Absolutely. That evening they made dinner from supplies the community had donated, beans and cornbread and coffee that tasted like home. They ate on the porch watching the sun set, painting everything gold and red. The land stretched away peaceful and quiet, bearing no marks of the war that had been fought over it. You know what I realized today, Rosalyn said. I spent so much time fighting to keep this place, that I forgot what it was like to just live here, to enjoy it. Seems like a good time to remember. Yeah. She set down her plate. Pa used to sit right here every evening. Said watching the sun go down was like watching God reset the world. Everything that went wrong during the day the sunset wiped clean. Tomorrow started fresh. He was a wise man. He was a stubborn old fool who got himself killed over dirt. But her voice was soft, loving. I miss him. I know he was dying anyway, but I miss him. Of course you do. Does it ever stop the missing? Caleb thought about his father, dead 20 years, but still present in unexpected moments. No, but it gets easier to carry. The weight doesn't change, but you get stronger. I hope you're right. She leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her. Tell me something true. Something you've never told anyone. Like what? I don't know. Something that matters. Something that'll make me feel less alone in my head. Caleb thought for a moment, searching for words he'd never spoken out loud. After Shiloh, after my father died, I used to dream about him every night. He'd be walking away through the mud, and I'd be calling after him, but he never turned around, never acknowledged me. I'd wake up feeling like I'd failed him somehow, like if I'd just called louder or run faster, maybe he'd have stopped. Maybe I could have saved him. But you couldn't have. No. But for years I believed I should have. Believed that if I'd been braver or smarter or just different, things would have changed. So I spent 20 years punishing myself by not caring about anything. Figured if I didn't care, I couldn't fail anyone again. That's a lonely way to live. It was. Until I rode up here and met a woman who wouldn't let me hide behind not caring anymore. He pulled her closer. You made me remember what it felt like to fight for something. Made me want to be the man my father thought I was instead of the coward I became. Rosalyn was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears she wouldn't let fall. Your father would be proud of you. I never met him, but I know he would be. How do you know? Because I'm proud of you, and I'm harder to impress. They sat there until full dark, wrapped in each other, and shared confessions, two people learning how to be something more than survivors. Learning how to be partners. Maybe eventually learning how to be whole. The settlement money came the following week, delivered by a nervous railroad clerk who kept apologizing like he'd personally evicted them. $200 in gold and paper notes that felt both too little and too much. This is what Morgan thought our suffering was worth? Rosalyn said, staring at the money. $200. Less than a good horse. It's enough to rebuild, enough to start over. Start over. She said it like she was testing the concept. Is that what we're doing? Starting over. I'd like to think we're finishing what your father started, making this place what he always wanted it to be. They spent the money carefully. Knew, well, first the driller charged $80, but promised clean water within a week. Seeds and equipment, second another $40, but necessary for spring planting. Supplies to repair the cabin, third $20 for lumber and nails and things that'd make the house livable again. That left $60, which Rosalyn split with Caleb, despite his protests. You earned it same as me, she insisted. You fought for this land. You deserve to share what it provides. I didn't fight for money. I know. That's exactly why you should take it. She pressed the bills into his hand. We're partners now, right? Partners share. Partners. He liked the sound of that word, liked what it implied about future and commitment and choosing to build something together. By October, the new well was finished and the cabin was repaired. They worked from dawn until dark most days, preparing for winter, storing food, fixing things. Morgan's harassment had broken. The work was hard but satisfying in ways that following railroad orders had never been. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other. Learned that Rosalyn hated mornings, but loved evenings. That Caleb couldn't cook worth a damn, but could fix anything mechanical. That they both had nightmares, hers about her father dying, his about soldiers screaming, and that holding each other helped. They didn't talk much about what they were becoming. Didn't define it or label it or make promises they weren't sure they could keep. They just lived together day by day, building something that felt like home. One evening in late October, Rosalyn came to him with something wrapped in old cloth. "I want to show you something." She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small hand-stitched piece of green cloth, delicate work, clearly made by someone who cared about beauty. "Mom made this right before she died. Told me to give it to a man who kept his dignity when no one would blame him for losing it. I've been carrying it for 8 years, waiting for someone worthy." Caleb took it gently, feeling the weight of what she was offering. "Rosalyn, I want you to have it. Not because I'm paying a debt or fulfilling a promise. Because you've earned it. Because you're the man she described, and I think she'd be glad I found you." He looked at the cloth, then at her face, open and vulnerable in ways she rarely allowed. "I don't deserve this. Nobody deserves anything. We just get what we get and try to be grateful." She folded his fingers around it. "Take it. Let it remind you that someone sees who you really are. Not the man who came to take land. The man who chose to protect it instead." Caleb pulled her close, and they stood there wrapped around each other, while autumn wind rattled the windows. The cloth pressed between them felt like a promise neither of them was quite ready to make, but both of them wanted to believe in. Winter came hard that year, snow piling up until the world disappeared under white. They spent long evenings by the fire, Caleb reading aloud from Jeremiah's books, while Rosalyn mended clothes or planned spring planting. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, sharing warmth. On Christmas Eve, Caleb gave her a small carved box he'd made from barnwood. "It's not much. It's perfect." She ran her fingers over the wood worn smooth by his hands. "What's it for?" "Whatever you want. Keepsakes, seeds, hope." He felt stupid saying it out loud. "I'm not good with words." "You're getting better." She kissed him, the first real kiss they'd shared, soft and careful, and full of promise. "Thank you. For this. For staying. For everything. Thank you for letting me stay." They held each other while snow fell outside, and the fire burned low, two people who'd found each other through loss and war and stubborn refusal to quit. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but sitting there with her head on his shoulder and his arms around her waist, Caleb figured it was the life they'd earned. Spring came with mud and green shoots pushing through last year's death. They planted together corn and beans, and hope working the soil that had cost them so much. Other families came by, sometimes people whose land had been returned by the territorial investigations. They'd stop to share news or ask advice or just acknowledge that they were part of something bigger than themselves. One warm April morning, Caleb was repairing fence when he saw Rosalyn standing by her father's grave, her hand on the rough stone marker. He walked over quietly, not wanting to intrude. "I was just telling Pa about the planting," she said without turning. "Telling him we're making it work. The land he loved. The home he built. I think he knows." "Maybe." She turned to face him, and Caleb saw tears on her face, but also something else. Peace. "I used to come here every day and feel angry. Angry that he died. Angry that he left me alone to fight. But lately, I just feel grateful. Grateful he taught me to stand. Grateful he gave me something worth fighting for. Grateful he brought you here even if it wasn't how anyone planned. You think he'd approve of us? I think he already did. That last day when he told you to take care of me, that wasn't just talk. That was permission. Blessing. Whatever you want to call it." She took his hand. "He liked you, you know. Told me once that you had good eyes. Said a man's eyes show whether he's running from something or toward something. He said you were running toward something even if you didn't know it yet. He was a wise man. He was." She squeezed his hand. "Would you do something for me? Anything. Marry me. Here, by his grave, with the land as witness. I don't need a church or a preacher or anything fancy. I just need you and this ground and a promise that we're building something that matters." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I know it's fast. I know we're probably crazy. But I also know that life's too short to wait for perfect timing. We've got right now. That's all anyone ever has." He thought about saying they should wait. Thought about all the reasons this was too soon, too fast, too risky. Then he thought about his father dying in the mud at Shiloh, about Jeremiah dying before seeing victory, about how much time people wasted waiting for perfect moments that never came. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I'll marry you." They married themselves 3 days later, standing by Jeremiah's grave at sunset, with the land stretching away in every direction. No witnesses, except the wind and the birds, and the memory of a man who'd fought for this ground. Rosalyn wore her mother's cloth pinned to her dress. Caleb wore his best shirt and the conviction that this was right. She spoke first, her voice steady and clear. "I promise to stand with you, to fight beside you, to build something worth keeping. I promise to be honest even when it hurts, to be strong when you're weak, to let you be strong when I'm weak. I promise to make this life matter." Caleb took her hands, feeling the calluses that matched his own. "I promise to protect what's ours, to work this land with you, to never walk away when things get hard. I promise to be the man you see in me, even when I can't see it myself. I promise to make your father proud." They sealed it with a kiss, not their first, but somehow the most important. The one that said this was real and permanent and chosen with eyes wide open. That night, they lay together for the first time, learning each other's bodies with the same careful attention they'd learned each other's hearts. It was awkward and sweet and imperfect and exactly right. Afterward, wrapped in blankets while the night cooled around them, Rosalyn traced patterns on his chest. "Tell me something," she said. "When you first rode up here with that deed, did you ever imagine this? Not even close. What did you imagine?" "I imagined serving papers and riding away and never thinking about you again. I imagined this being like the 100 other evictions I'd done. Easy, clean, forgettable. And instead, I found someone who changed everything. Someone who made me remember what it felt like to care about something more than orders." He kissed her forehead. "Best mistake I ever made. Tearing up that deed. Meeting you. Summer came with heat that made the work harder, but the evenings sweeter. They worked the land together, building something that looked more like a real farm every day. The corn grew tall. The beans flourished. The well water ran cold and clear. And slowly, carefully, they built a life that felt earned. Other couples came, sometimes people who'd heard their story and wanted to see the farm that had been worth fighting for. They'd stand in the yard, looking at the rebuilt barn and the flourishing garden, and the two people who'd refused to quit, and Caleb could see them thinking maybe it was possible. Maybe fighting back wasn't suicide. Maybe standing up mattered. One evening in late July, they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance over the fields. Rosalyn's hand rested on her belly, still flat, but not for much longer. They'd only known for a week, hadn't told anyone yet. Were still getting used to the idea themselves. "You scared?" she asked. Terrified. "Good. Me too." She leaned against him. "But also excited. Also hopeful. Also grateful we get to do this together." "You think we'll be good at it?" "Parenting. I think we'll be honest. We'll mess up and figure it out and mess up again. But we'll do it together, and we'll do it on land that's ours. That matters." Caleb thought about the child growing inside her. Thought about teaching them to work this ground, to stand up for what's right, to fight when necessary, and forgive when possible. Thought about Jeremiah never getting to meet his grandchild, but being present anyway in the values they'd passed down. "Your father would be proud," he said. "Yeah, he would be." She turned to look at him. "You know what I think about? Sometimes I think about that first day when I offered myself to save him. How desperate I was. How certain I was that we'd lose everything. And then I think about now married to the man who came to take our land, carrying his child, living on ground we fought for together. Life's strange, isn't it? Strange and good. Strange and good, she agreed. I'll take it. They sat there until full dark, two people who'd found each other through loss and battle and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The land stretched away around them, peaceful and productive, bearing no scars from the war that had been fought over it. Above them, stars came out cold and distant, same as they'd been the night Jeremiah died, the night Morgan burned the barn, the night Caleb first realized he cared more about this woman than about his orders. The stars didn't care about human struggles. They just kept burning, kept turning, kept marking time, in a universe that moved forward, whether people were ready or not. But down here on this patch of Montana ground in this cabin, built by determined hands, two people had built something the stars couldn't touch. Something that mattered not because it was perfect, but because it was chosen. Because they'd fought for it. Because they'd refused to let cruelty and money and power erase them from the land they loved. Caleb pulled Rosalyn closer, feeling her heartbeat against his ribs. You know what the best part is? What's that? We get to keep going, keep building, keep fighting for what matters. That's not just surviving, that's living. Yeah. She pressed her face against his shoulder. That's exactly what it is. And there under stars that had watched generations rise and fall on land paid for in grief and courage, two people who'd been broken and made each other whole again, held each other tight and believed in tomorrow. Not because tomorrow was promised, but because they'd learned the hard way that the only thing worth having was the thing you were willing to fight for. They'd come to take. They'd stayed to protect. And in the staying, they'd found something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them needed a home, a partner, a reason to believe that justice wasn't just what rich men called their victories, but what ordinary people built with their hands and hearts and stubborn refusal to quit. The land would outlast them. The mountains would stand long after their names were forgotten. But for now, for this moment, for all the moments they'd earned through blood and determination and love, they were exactly where they belonged. And that was more than enough. That was everything.